What's going on YouTube? LA Prepper here with another video, and today we are on Zillow looking at lots and land for sale. Let's take a look at one of these. Look at this nice little piece on the edge of the forest. Quite literally on the edge of the forest. Oh, are we short on pictures? We're a little short on pictures. That's no fun. Let's try door number 2 in Thorne, California. Oh, here we go. Look at that beautiful lot. Even has some natural roadways in there. Let's look at the next picture. Ooh, that looks nice. You could find some coyotes and rabbits up in there. Interesting. Very interesting. I would love that piece of land. I don't know if I'm willing to pay $15,000 for it. Don't think I would pay $15,000 for that. Maybe if it was the last piece of land for sale in California. But I digress. Before I talk about get into this video, this search, in case you're curious, is $10,000 to $20,000. Home type is lots and land, and I've selected 5 acres or more. So if you can believe that, this is all the lots for sale, or at least most of them. Zillow's not 100%, but it's pretty good. Most of the lots for sale for under $20,000 in Southern California. In fact, let's take this down to 5,000 and let's say 15. Wow, still a bunch. So, you want to buy some bug out land. Now, I should mention that I am not a licensed real estate agent. I am not a licensed financial planner. So please consider this my personal opinion on things to consider when buying bug out land. I have worked in real estate, and I'm hoping to share some of my experience and some of my opinions in regards to making a purchase like this. So without further ado, number one thing to consider, purpose of the land. What are you going to do out there? Is it going to be bug out land? Are you going to vacation out there? Are you going to homestead out there, live out there permanently? Are you going to park your trailer out there? Are you and your family going to move out there? What do you want to do with the land? You don't just have to decide one thing. You don't necessarily have to decide it now, but say, for example, you have an RV you want to put on the land, and for whatever reason, you're intent on buying land without even seeing it. Let's say you're going to work, with the realtor. They're going to send you pictures and whatnot. And for some awful reason, you end up buying a piece of land that, your RV doesn't fit on, or you can't build a driveway on. You're done for. Or let's say you buy a piece of land and you're thinking you're going to dig a well, but you don't do your research and look into rules and regulations, and you have to have type of license, and then there's limited numbers of licenses, and it turns out until you get some license that's not available for 10 years, who knows, worst case scenario, right? You can't drill a well on your land for water. Those are like 2 really specific examples, but the point is, plan on having 1 or 2 purposes for what that land is going to be for, and focus your entire plan around that. Okay, you can't just say, oh, I want some land, or oh, I want it to be in the mountains, or oh, I want it to be far away from civilization. Have specific goals in mind. Do you want to have a property on there? Do you want to build your property? What type of property are you going to build? Zoning and stuff like that. I actually didn't even put a specific thing on here regarding zoning, but maybe I'll talk about it in development costs. So, number 1, have a specific purpose for what you're going to do. It's going to help the rest of the plan fall into place. Number 2, Resources. What kind of resources do you want your land to have? Water? Do you want it to have, fertile land? Do you want it to have like woods, shrubs, desert, a lake, wild animals? I don't think you can search by whether or not a property has wild animals in the MLS. That'd be an interesting category, right? But think about what your ideal resources are. Your must-haves, your really would like haves, kind of would like to haves. Think about what kind of resources you're looking for. It's going to help a realtor you're working with get information. It's going to help you focus your search. Once you figure out, what a certain county or city wants you to do, what kind of hoops they want you to jump through to dig a well. If you're looking up a city in another county, could have similar things. For example, if you're looking up certain tax information, you're always contacting the assessor's office. If you want to put a real estate deal through a title company, you're going to be contacting a title or an escrow office. So the more you do this, the more you familiarize yourself with, the real estate game and purchasing land, the more comfortable you're going to be doing things like looking up, like, can you mine, for example? Could you mine an ore at your property? Can you cut down trees and sell them at your property? Most of the time you probably could, but just keep in mind there are a lot of rules and regulations, especially water. Just because you have a creek running through your property does not mean you can just use as much of that creek as you want. You might have to get water rights. Your water rights might be limited. I'm absolutely not an expert on all this stuff, but suffice it to say, you have to be familiar, and you have to do it on a case-by-case basis. If you're looking at 10 different properties and they all have creeks through them, you got to figure out what the deal is for each one of those creeks. You can't just cross your fingers and say, well, the county think this or the city thinks that. You really got to look specifically at each property, because there's just so many things that can be different, even on a property by property basis, right? So look at what resources you want and do your research in regards to if you're going to take advantage of those resources, if there are any rules and regulations regarding that. Number 3, purchase price and development cost. The purchase price, of course, is just one small part of it. A lot of times people see really affordable land and they think, oh, that's great. I'm going to buy this lot for $10,000, no big deal. But if you don't have water, you don't have electricity, you don't have sewer, maybe you have a dirt road going in there, you don't have fencing, you don't have a building, you have nothing out there. So it's fine and dandy to pick up the land, but if you're trying to build a house and a house costs $100,000 and you're not the type to live in an RV, you got to kind of plan a little bit ahead for that. So never hurts to get a couple quotes. Even if you're not planning on putting sewer, let's say you're going to compost, maybe you're going to compost when you first get to the property. If you are going to live on the property, maybe you have an RV, you're going to compost too, right? So you do those two things, but eventually you want to get sewer installed, but you're not going to get a quote for sewer because, to get the sewer, let's say you have it to the street. If you're really lucky, you would have it to the street. You might not even have it to the street. A lot of stuff up in the mountains, up in more sparsely populated areas of the state, you're not going to have a sewer line to your street, and you don't even want to think about how much it's going to cost to run sewer line up a block underground. There's basically no way you would ever pay for that out of your pocket unless you were really desperate to have sewer lines. Probably going to have a septic tank or, something like that, right? So don't be afraid, even if you're not going to get something installed, the month after you pick up the property, get a quote or two. Even if you have to pay somebody to come out, it's worth paying, having a contractor come out and give you a quote. You can tell them straight up, look, I'm moving into this property. I might not get this done for a couple years, but I'm looking for a quote. And maybe they'll send you one via email. Maybe you can talk to them on the phone. Maybe they don't even need to come out. Maybe you can send them a picture. I don't know, right? But spending a little bit of time and energy on the front end to figure out what the deal is with development costs regarding, resources, regarding, especially like when it comes to building a home. I was looking at some properties that were on really like kind of crappy lots. Like one of them, the whole lot looked like it was this kind of slanted. Another one looked like it was sort of a canyon, like the canyon ran through the middle of the lot. And if you were just growing plants or something, or you had some goats or chickens, maybe you could work around it. But when you're talking about doing foundation stuff and you have really crappy slopes like that, not only do you lose a lot of real estate as far as just having some nice, relatively flat land to build stuff on, but all the engineering gets more complicated. It's definitely kind of instantly goes into what you're going to want to hire a contractor for rather than something you might do yourself, unless you get your designs approved by an engineer and you feel like what you're doing is pretty legit. Trying to put up piers and foundations and retaining walls and stuff like that, in soil of unknown quality is just asking for disaster. So definitely keep in mind, like, even if you want to build the whole house yourself and you're just going to pay someone for the foundation, get a quote for what it is to set up a 20 by 20 foundation on this awful canyon lot. Going to be a lot of money. So a little bit of planning on the front end is going to help give you an accurate idea of if you're going to be out there saving money to buy more preps, or if you're going to buy a boondoggle, right? Okay, I'm talking about services here. Kind of relates to resources, but water is kind of, in my opinion, the least of your worries. You can get water from a variety of sources. Buying it is a pain in the butt, but at least you can buy it. Garbage, that's another thing. You might not have garbage service in your area. It might be expensive if there's not a lot of houses in your area, because they figure they have to charge everyone more because there's not a lot of clients. So, you might find out it's $100 a month for garbage, and here you are trying to save money by, buying this $10,000 piece of land, right? Getting water, I'm kind of a fan of trying to find land that has some kind of water supply. It definitely doesn't rain enough in California to make collecting water a real viable thing, unless you're collecting, ungodly amounts of water to last you all year. Sewer is the expensive thing. Getting a cesspool or a cesspit pumped isn't necessarily that expensive, a few $100. And if you live by yourself or you have a small family, maybe it'll take you a year or so to fill it up. But the thing is, as long as it's in good condition, then you're doing all right. If you have to like rip it up out of the ground, God forbid there's some problem and you get an inspection, the guy's like, oh, it's totally messed, and I don't know, it ends up you have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to get your cesspit redone. That's a disaster, so sewer, getting rid of sewage can be something that isn't a big deal if you have good facilities and good services. If you don't have facilities or services, or you have to get them installed, just something to be aware of. Not to say that you can't, get a building permit and get a pit put in your house and whatnot, or in your property. It's not the biggest deal in the world. But just another thing you got to keep in mind. You're not going to show up to a house with a toilet, right? If you're buying a piece of land and you want to do your own thing, it's not just the plumbing from your house to the street. You want your street to have plumbing too, if you're going that option. Number 5, topography. Kind of talked about it a little bit earlier as far as, home on the slope or a canyon. Just have an idea of what kind of conditions you're okay with and what kind of conditions are kind of a no-go. I leave that to you to decide, but I will say this. If you're in the middle or the bottom of a hill, there is a chance you're going to have more issues with runoff, rain flow from higher on the hill coming down the hill. And that's not just a landslide issue. That's a flooding issue. It's a groundwater issue, foundation settling issue. Runoff can cause so many problems. It can be dealt with. It's not the hardest thing in the world to deal with, but just another thing to be conscious of. I was talking earlier about canyons and construction costs. If you're trying to build a house across, a very steep incline, be prepared to spend a little bit more money. If you're going to dig into the side of a hill and, a substantial amount, be prepared to spend, a little bit of money to deal with that. Keeping in mind whether or not your property, below the soil, whether or not you have rock or fill. You may not have subterranean goals, right? You may not want to dig that much down in the dirt. Who knows? Maybe you do. Maybe you want to secretly build a container bunker and bring in a container in the middle of the night and bury one in your property. Well, if your property turns out to be a bunch of rock and not nice soft dirt, or at least smaller pieces of dirt, sandstone and smaller rocks and stuff, if you're on solid bedrock and you're trying to bury a container, you can have a really bad day. Blasting rock, like trying to get rid of, blasting a container-sized hole in mostly solid rock. It's possible, completely doable. Costs a lot of money. Costs a ludicrous. You're better off buying another piece of land, or not burying the container. So that's kind of extreme examples, right? But the point is, to all those people buying land that think, oh, I would never want to have like a geologist. I would never pay $100 to a geologist and come up and tell me like what kind of soil and rock, I should be expecting in the area beneath the surface. But you never know. Plants don't like rocks that much either. If you really do have a lot of rock, and you're thinking about planting an orchard and trees and all this stuff, you might want to think about that too. Number 6, proximity to civilization. You might think that you want to be out in the middle of nowhere, and you might come to realize that you hate being in the middle of nowhere. It's one thing to have a little bit of elbow room, but it's another thing to just kind of be living, on a dirt lot, just surrounded by dirt, like you in your RV. It would just be really weird to me, like a scene out of Breaking Bad. I see these lots, like this one here, Utility Road, Hinckley, California. It's just in the middle of nowhere. But can you just imagine building your house on this little piece of land? It seems a little vulnerable, right? Just being in the middle of a big open field like that. Doesn't seem like in a shit hits the fan scenario, that would be a very safe place. And I'm going to talk about that coming up. This video is getting a little bit long, so I'm going to try to rush through this. But think about how far you really want to be. Do you want to take a half an hour drive every time you want to go to Walmart? Would you rather it was a 15-minute drive? Think about it. If your car breaks down, you might be able to ride your bicycle to the auto parts store where you live now. You go live up in the mountains and you're a 40-minute drive away from AutoZone, and there's no bus. Do you want to take a 40-minute taxi? You might have a friend who'd give you a ride. Which brings me to number 7, neighbors. Do you want neighbors? Do you care about neighbors? It's not very difficult to walk around your neighborhood, even talk to your neighbors if you really are planning on purchasing land. I don't see a problem with going up and talking to people and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this piece of land. What's going on? What's the deal? What are people like? And maybe they'll slam the door in your face, who knows, but for a few minutes of your time, absolutely worth checking out. Number 8, defensive capability. Man, I gotta get some water here. How defensible is your land? This piece of property, in the middle of this desert, it's not very defensible. I have some water over here. Hopefully it's still good. Freaking dying. It's so warm. But that other property that I was talking about up in the canyons or up on the hills, it's a lot more defensible in the sense that it's a lot more remote. You have the hillside. So you're not going to get people coming at you from all directions. You have a lot of choke points coming in there because all those mountain roads, there's like only one road going up this way and only one road going up that way. So, one or two choke points and you're kind of securing your whole area, right? But just something to think about. At least I would think about it. If part of your reason to buying this land is to kind of get away from the masses of people because God knows what's going to happen, maybe, and you just don't want to be around that many people, hundreds of thousands of starving people, right? Then you may as well take it the next step and say, well, once I get to where I am, can I defend where I am? Am I in the middle of the desert? That seems like a really tough spot to defend unless you had some great walls and a really tight community. I mean, you would be such an obvious target. It seems like it'd be really easy to blockade you. I'd rather have a little bit of geography helping me out, so people 10 miles away just can't use their binoculars and say, oh, there's some house over there and he's burning a fire and whatever, right? Number 9, your experience level. Okay, this is a really big one. I should have put it a little bit higher up. There's going to be all manner of people in the next, at least this is my prediction, the next, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to see all manner of people move to rural areas. Some of them will be preppers, some of them will be people retiring, some of them will be people that are just trying to save a buck or two because they figure living in an RV on some land they bought for 10 grand is better than trying to pay for, $150,000 house, right? Going to be a variety of people and a variety of experience levels, and that's totally fine. Not everyone's going to have raised chickens or have any construction experience or know how to build a house or till a field or, work on a tractor, and that's totally okay. But try to be somewhat realistic about your own skill set. If you rarely pick up a hammer or power tools in your daily life, and your heart is set on going and building your house from scratch, a standard house from scratch, not going to say that I think it's a bad idea, but it's something that you're not necessarily setting yourself up for success, right? Now, if you wanted to move out to some land and let's say move out in an RV, build a tiny house to get some experience building, and then build a slightly bigger house after you have a little more experience and money saved up, that's a little bit more of a tenable plan, right? And even things regarding experience, like I've read good comments and seen feedback online on other people's videos about gardening and how this idea that you're just going to go up and start a garden from scratch and you're going to be growing all this food and not to say it can't happen, but getting the dirt healthy, getting your gardening experience to a level where you're producing food on a regular basis, it's a monumental challenge. And can people do it with no experience? Sure, absolutely. I think if you set your mind to something, you can do a lot of things, right? Most things, not everything, but most things. Excuse me. But just don't try to reach way beyond what your experience level is, or at least if you are, try to have some kind of contingency plan or fallback plan. For example, if you have no construction experience, there's nothing wrong with trying to build a tiny house, but you might not want to go up and sleep in a tent while you build your tiny house. You might want to have an RV, something that's a little bit more safe and secure and comfortable than just sleeping in a tent. Could you sleep in a tent the whole time while you were building a tiny house? Yeah, sure. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to say you're an idiot. You're braver than I am. I'm not trying to sleep in a tent for months and months on end. You could, but you absolutely could. So don't be afraid of taking a big risk or taking a big challenge in buying some land, but definitely keep in mind some of the things that I've talked about, and just a few hours of research talking to a few different professionals. You're going to save yourself a lot of headaches, potentially. Number 10, to wrap up this video before it turns into a half an hour long video, resale potential. Okay, just because this land is for sale at 15,000 and you pay 13,000 for it and you thought it was a deal, um, doesn't mean that you're going to be able to sell it for 13,000 or even 10,000 or 9,000 in a year from now, in 2 years from now, in 10 years from now. Some of these places in California or wherever you're living, um, they were going to be developed, for one reason or another. Um, but it just, it never happened. Who knows why, but it never happened, right? So a lot of these are lots that are very likely not going to be the next Silicon Valley, over here in Hinckley, California. I don't imagine, what's the population of Hinckley? Not to pick on Hinckley, but rinky-dink little town. Population of 1,915 in the year 2000, okay? I don't think they're going to have a population of 10,000 in a couple years from now, right? So Hinckley is going to be a small rinky-dink town for the foreseeable future. So don't expect that, home prices are going up on average at 5% a year and my land's going to go up 5% a year because that's what the average home price goes up. No, probably not. Which goes back to purpose. If your purpose is to live there and you're going to work somewhere else, build a home, bug out location, whatever it is, make sure that the price that you pay, the price that you're going to pay, if you're not paying cash, all those interest payments add up to more than the purchase price. And I'm not going to get into that, but I hope you understand what I mean. Mortgage payments and interest. Make sure it's worth it for what you want. If it's worth it for what you want, then, find something that's good value and buy it and go on with your life and be happy. But, once you start getting into this whole, I'm going to flip land and I'm going to make a profit and stuff like that, or I'm just going to buy it and hold on to it and never use it, which is like the worst thing to do with land, in my opinion. You're just kind of setting yourself up. A lot of the prices of this land that is on Zillow, if you go back and look at the history, you can almost guarantee that, probably half of these lots were bought or sold by someone in the last 5 or 10 years. There's a good chance it was more than, this person paid for it. I don't know. Can we get price history on this stuff? Yeah, probably not on most of it. But at any rate, keep in mind that just because you pay a price for a piece of land doesn't mean it's going to be that price in the future. So, unless you're, excuse me, unless you're buying it, for a really solid reason and you see yourself getting some good utility out of that land for the long term, treat land purchase as seriously as you would treat a home purchase because, you can lose the money either way, or you can be stuck in a property either way. And even though there's no house on it, it can still give you just as many, if not more, headaches than a property with land on it or with a house on it, right? So just trying to do my part to save you a headache or two. Of course, I recommend you work with a licensed real estate professional and a myriad of other licensed professionals if you are going to be purchasing some land. But I just wanted to give you my 2 cents on some things to consider when buying bug out land. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.